Don't anybody take that personal. This is not a religious program. No need to change the channel. How about another verse in the song that we have been singing about how in the intellectual, speech-based service industries, which is what we call the secondary version of life, that in these service industries, they must ultimately appear to be putting out some kind of product. And we were specifically, if you recall, in part pointing out that there is a continuing, unspoken, and of course there's nothing wrong with it, it's not that they're supposed to do otherwise, but there is a continual, unspoken doubt in ordinary life as to whether any form of routine thought or speech will actually ever get you anywhere. Now, I know that's the sort of thing that you could stop there, I can make some kind of face and put a little more sarcastic spin. That sounds like the good old everyday, give it to life and that everybody's a dumbass. And it's not true, but the reality of that, and it's based on the flows of energy, the reality of that is true. Because if we went back real quick, God almighty, here goes another one of those 2-hour introductions. Yeah, but it doesn't cost any more, so, screw you. Thank you. Nobody liked the one about this place where everyone got horny at supper time and wanted to eat when it rained? None of you thought that had anything to do with what it said, did you? It has to do with primary activities when they get into the secondary world. How everything seems to come at an inopportune time, but if it were otherwise and everything came at an opportune time, you and I would have had no grandparents, we would have had no history. The first family that ever lived, the Flintstones or whoever it was, they would have done that which was opportune, and that'd been it. It'd been the end of the little, the cartoon. There'd been no commercial. The network would not even signed off. It'd just been, it was like maybe you'd think, I think I heard T.S. Eliot just fall down or something. But there would have been no real conclusion. Even I don't think about that one. What we were saying was the flow of energy amounts to, if we were going to be crude real quick and talk about it as though it were psychological, it is an absolute fact. Rather than making these continual caveats about this is not psychological, it's not a criticism, if there was some way to deal in ordinary talk and make criticism like criticism, to make psychology that was not criticism, because there is no such thing. You cannot go to a well psychiatrist. You cannot study healthy psychology any more than you can find a robust religion. That's not what and it's not the fault of the religion or anything, it's the nature of the fact that all news is bad news. Because all news that is alive is about change. And all change seems to be, at the very least, somewhat disheartening, if not disorienting. You didn't lose your place, did you? But if there was some way to talk about psychology, rather than me always saying, well, this is not a psychological observation, it's certainly not a critique. If you could talk about if you could use apparent psychological dressing and descriptions on what's going on at the playground and in the stadium, without them being critical, then this would still be true, and we could put it this way, that everyone does understand, everyone does have the doubt, no matter who they are, unless you're an absolute fanatic, and then you are, of course, in the higher echelons of the city world, and you're probably in politics, and it doesn't matter. But everyone else has a doubt that any ordinary talk or thought, including their own, is actually ever going to get them anywhere. Hence, if you look under complete books of all the world's great quotations, my suggestion, I've never done it, but my suggestion is you would find twice as many or more entries under the word luck than you would talent. Huh? You know I'm right, even without being right. We don't have to check it. You know that's true. In fact, when people do get famous, when people do apparently rise to the top in city affairs and ordinary affairs, and if they're questioned about to what do you attribute this, even taking into account the kind of sham humility, or even real humility, or even real sham humility that does fly in the city, people, just taken for a second, these famous people, just in a moment of lucidity, will go, well, now I studied, I worked hard, I busted my chops, I paid my dues, I woodshedded, I studied. But when it gets right down to it, you cannot underestimate, oh, what should we call it? Oh, what should we call it? And of course, everybody knows what they call it. Friggin' luck's what you know. That's why you're famous and I'm not. There is, and it sounds right psychologically, but it is deeper than that, of course, but it sounds right that everyone has a doubt about themselves and certainly about other people and about life, whether routine, whether ordinary, even at the best level, but the ordinary thinking and ordinary speech is actually ever going to get you anywhere. It's, in the agricultural sense, it's a question about whether you can ever be serviced in a positive manner. You understand that, even you people who didn't grow up on a farm. That means, is it possible that you're ever going to be loved and not just merely screwed? It still has to do with services and products in case you lost your place. But at any rate, ergo, you've got all speech and thought ultimately seeming to come to some kind of conclusion. That is, it apparently puts out some product. All conversation, all debate, all theorizing, and even the internal chatter that runs you ultimately puts out a product. Me. Yes, I. So much for the intro. For those of you who even imagined before you heard the Kyroot that you might, being the great lover of speed, that you might someday like to move next to the racetrack. But many of the people who thought they did, or thought they wanted to, and once they did, they found themselves completely, the Kyroot said, wearied. For you people up north, people have moved there and find themselves completely worn out, whooped from the constant noise and activity. Well, just look around you. You don't ever feel like, well, I think I'll take a break. We're back up to date, right? There was a Kyroot tonight that even pointed out, I was going to slip us into something if possible, there was a Kyroot that pointed out that there was a man who said that he about had most nouns under control and was about to jump in to the next step, which could even be the final step as far as he was concerned, of curbing verbs. Now I know several of you kind of moved your chair around and scratched and coughed, but consider, in line with what we're talking about, that it would only be someone truly neurally unsettled or neurally homeless who could stand, who could be satisfied with a primary activity, which speech now is, but could be satisfied with that kind of primary activity to be and to remain a service, a verb, an ongoing activity. Was it the dramatic holding up of the fingers that threw everyone? I forget that. Back to the three primaries. No sane person should be suicidal, but no sane person, just at any ordinary level, would take sex, eating, staying relatively homeostatic from vis-a-vis the elements. No one would take any of those. No one could be satisfied taking those as being an ongoing project. Now, you do know you have to eat tomorrow, so don't get foolish. You eat today and you have to eat tomorrow. But no one considers that eating is a service, that eating is a verb. That is, you do not, and you could not. It's simply not so. You do not eat without expecting to get satiated, to get full. You do not screw without expecting to get satisfied. No one else at the ordinary level, now that speech, even though it be unnoted, is the new, I'm not going to say kid on the block, and have you people who like music write me dirty letters, is a neo-primary People now accept, in the ordinary world, look at your own nervous system, they accept and expect that speech itself be satisfying. That you expect, if you're hungry, to sit down and eat a meal and it come to a conclusion. That it is a product, that the sentence, the act of eating has a conclusion. Right now, instantly. That you eat and you get satisfied. People also expect, without analyzing it this way, since they don't even look at it as being a primary need, but they expect and operate in such a way as to almost make it appear to be true, as we'll get into in a minute, that speech is some kind of product. That it will come. All right, I'm going to talk to this person. I'm going to turn to my girlfriend and say, why do you keep running around with those 3 rock bands? Or you ask your kid, why are you in a rock band? You ask somebody something, or you engage in conversation, and you expect that it will come to a conclusion. That it will be satisfying. In the same way that you eat a meal and you expect, I'll eat the meal in a few minutes, I'll be, at least for the time being, I'll be full, I'll be satisfied. It'll be the end of the sentence. You expect the same of talk. I don't have to take this real curiously, because it's in at a very minute level that does have something to do with the running of ordinary life, but you expect in such basis you're out trying to make a living. You're out trying to get enough money so that you can eat, and you're trying to go out and service an account. And you're in a new part of town, and you stop and ask a man, can you tell me where 4th and Elm is? And the man says, 2 blocks down, 1 block over to the left. That's the way it's supposed to be. That's the way life operates. That conversation came to a conclusive end, a satisfying end, assuming the guy was correct. That you will now get where you were going. It gets a little more obscure, a little less specific, but it's still true that people expect. Man says to his wife, where in the hell have you been for 3 days? Now, if we want to take a time out right quick, I want you to see what's going on, because you know by now it's not sociological, it's not psychological, and it's certainly not marriage counseling. Now, we could take, right quick, jump around to 4 or 5 positions. Inside of life's body, inside of this kind of city, domestic affair, inside of one's neural system, you could take 2 or 3 positions and say, wait a minute, he's not really asking, because if he suspects that she has been out for the last 3 days with those 3 rock bands that she's been hanging around with, if he really suspects that, he's not asking, where have you been? And her say, well, all right, the first night we went over to the Days Inn, and me and the 2 bass players. He's not really asking that. So that's be one position. Then you could say, all right, he's asking that, but my God, the man is a poster boy for stupidity. I mean, where does he think she's been? Does he think that every now and then she turns into Peter Pan or something, just disappears for 3 days? Or maybe a third possibility. Is he just maybe subtly stupid? And he's going to say, where have you been? And she's going to say, well, I've been out on a religious retreat. And he looks down, and her clothes are ripped, and she smells like a brewery. You could take all these kinds of attitude and say, well, what's stupidity? You could say, why does he even bother? Let's say that you're an observer, that you have been outside the 3-dimensional frame of this scenario, and that you've seen this happen before. And so that you know that this is not the first time by any means that this has happened, and you could take even a 4th position and say, why does he even bother to ask her? Because no matter what she says, you can't call this a reasonable relationship. It's going nowhere. It's already fallen apart. I mean, the Titanic is sinking, and he's staying there on board looking at, further travel brochures. The man's an idiot. The man's dreaming. You could take all those positions. You follow? I did that to try to get you looking one way. Now look real quick. All of that is still on the basis. Let's assume that everything else staying equal, that this guy that asked the question, where have you been, is still somewhat of the mainstream of life. What he is, no matter what kind of cynical, sardonic, sarcastic, caustic view you might take, he is still looking for some speech-based satisfaction. But now take some of the first 4 possible criticisms that he could have used, or that you could have used looking at the situation, and say, wait a minute, there is nothing she can say. If this is to be a middle-class Ozzie and Harriet, My 3 Sons, or some kind of make-believe archetypical family situation, he looks at her. She's been gone 3 days. She came in. She pulled up there in a van after 3 days. It took off, and I counted at least 22 guys in the van, all waving. Her clothes are ripped. She smells like hell. No matter what she says, the proof is there, right? So you can say no matter what she says. If she does say, well, I've been off on a religious retreat, you know. What if she says, I've been off on a very strange religion. No matter what she says, you could take the view from out there somewhere and say, no matter what she says, words are not going to change reality. God, are you stupid? Where have you been? What do you mean words are not going to change reality? You didn't hear the choir? The chorus? You didn't hear the bass player? I mean, the bass singer finally come out? Not the bass player. You didn't hear that Kyroot? It's not a matter. That's only for children to say, wait a minute. Words are not going to change reality. You know, go out in the playground and throw up. Yeah. You've been playing skip rope too long, and you've been upside down, you know, bouncing on your head. It's not a matter that words will not change reality. That's not the point. So you could say, well, nothing the woman's going to say, I mean, the evidence, the physical evidence, the reality, I'm using ordinary observations, the reality of what's happening cannot be changed by words. All right, let's skip that part. I mean, that question, and look at it this way. If you can see it, he, that is, a part of life's body, he is expecting it to. But now right quick, jump back simultaneously, and you could say, like I was kidding, you say, well, the man is a world-class idiot. You mean he's going to look at her and see that van drive off and everybody hooping and hollering, and that she can come up with some story? Are you going to tell me that? Some story, and he's going to accept it? He's an idiot. Forget that. Go back, and I still assume everything being somewhat standard. He asked the question on the basis, and we're talking about life's energy working through man. He is asking the question on the basis that he's expecting it to. Forget that you say, well, he's an idiot to expect it to. That's not the point. He is operating on the basis of expecting that the conversation, that is talk-based reality, will come to some satisfactory conclusion the same way that I'm hungry, I say I need a meal, I'm satisfied. Don't stand there like an idiot behind that and say, wait a minute, you can't call it satisfied. That's a fool's paradise, because tomorrow you're going to be hungry again. That's the same way and say, wait a minute. He is asking her for a verbal explanation for that which I can see has no verbal explanation. This cannot be justified. Words will not get her out of this. That's not the point. It's the expectation. Life is arranged in such a way, and again, or one more time we'll do it for you, you could still be part of life's ordinary, very crude body and say, because I was going to say he's expecting it to, and you could say, well, it's just further proof that the man is el stupido. The man is a peckerhead. You still missed it. We're not talking about that one man. We're talking about that conversation now. The fourth S of speech is arranged in such a way that it expects to come to a conclusion. It expects that speech will put out a product. Forget whether it does or not, because once you eat, you're going to be hungry tomorrow. You can engage in sex, and according to how your hormones are flowing, and think, boy, do I feel great. I wish I smoked. And 5 minutes later, you look out the window and a neighbor goes by, and there you are again. So what? That's the same basis as speech being now product-driven. That speech is expected to come to a conclusion. Forget whether it does. Nothing comes to a conclusion unless you're going to count death. That guy keeps saying it's worth about 22. I don't know where you got that number. We need a new definition of what count means. See, he thinks it has something to do with Red Bank. That's where Basie was born. So. It would only be back to where we tried to be, which was a long way from New Jersey, I'll grant you that. But it would only be someone who was neurally homeless, someone who was unsettled purposefully in the nervous system, who could accept this, who would seek it, well, who could accept it. I can't stop and beat it forever. If you're involved with doing this, you're doing it. It doesn't matter what we described as how you got here, but it would only be somebody who was that kind of neurally homeless, who could be satisfied with there being a basic function. And we're not talking about the other three S's because we've already been through that. It's suicidal to play with them. There's nothing to be done with them. But to get in now to a new primary function, which speech now is, once you see it. If you don't see it, it's not. But if you see it, you see that it is a primary function, and life could not go on without it. Not modern life, that obviously couldn't. Life could not. You could not back up, you cannot strip away human speech anymore. It is a primary, but it would only be somebody who is already neurally beyond the grasp, if not the pale of this, that could be unsettled, enough of an outlaw in here, not out there, but in here, so that they could accept a primary need as being inconclusive. That which should be a product to everybody else they expected, but it would only be a kind of neural revolutionist could accept it as continually being a service, never a product. For it being always a verb, not a noun. For it to be an ongoing, in work, in progress work. Who else could do that? That's not to blow some kind of illusionary proud smoke up your bloomers. Just look at it from an ordinary view. What sane person in life would undertake any kind of activity, forget that the activity seems to be vague, nebulous, and without any specific promise? What if the closest thing to a promise was that this road goes nowhere? Well, it'd be insanity, right? It would be, from that view. Not just that this may not go anywhere that can be described, nay, nay, nay. It would be the tacit, because it'd have to be silent, but it would be a kind of assurance that not only does this not go anywhere, maybe, this may not go anywhere guaranteed. And for somebody who is nearly homeless go, of course they wouldn't say it, but I'm going to say it for them, they'd go, I found my place. Who else would do it? The nervous system is not arranged anymore, to take the comparison back real quick, to a place that we can't play with, which makes the detailing between the two, or it should be a little more stark. If we took eating, it would be suicidal. No one should try and eat in such a way that would be unsatisfying. No one's going to sit down to a meal, to draw the parallel right quick if you need it. No one would sit down at a meal and say, well, now, what I want to eat is something that probably will not satisfy me. No, wait a minute. I can do better than that. I want something to eat that you guarantee. I can be guaranteed I will not be satisfied with it. That's what I want. That's insanity. That is suicidal. That is not for anyone. But the parallel I'm trying to get you to see, everyone else, the ordinary nervous system in you, is now wired up for talk to be a new primary activity, and it equally feels as though I am only here, I am only talking, an offshoot of thinking, on the basis that what I'm about to do, at least if not right this second, in a minute, I'll get a new menu, or I'll move to somebody else's table, I'll order another course, and this will satisfy me, it will come to a conclusion. And that's the way it's supposed to be. That's the only reason people talk in life. Because remember, there is this kind of unknown great fear that talk is not going to get you anywhere. And so on top of that, everyone has to pretend, to use crude terms. They have to sort of pretend that, yes, this is going to get somewhere. Oh, I know it is. That may take, we may have to debate the matter, we may have to meet again, or we may have to appoint a subcommittee. But we'll meet here again next week. I just know this is going to get us somewhere. All we've got to do is talk about it. That's it. Now, darling, you go clean up, straighten out your, put on some fresh clothes, and we'll talk about this. I know something must be troubling you, and we'll work it out. Only somebody weird, I'm sorry, a neural revolutionist, would accept that which is now a primary affair, speech, accept it as being inconclusive, as it being not a noun, a verb, as it being a service, not a purveyor of goods, as it being an ongoing work in progress. Nobody else would do it. Nobody. They're not supposed to. Hell, I'm not even sure you're supposed to. Take that off the tape. Wipe that from your mind. See, that was a joke. It wasn't a damn joke. Who would try and think about anything if they not only suspected it wasn't going anywhere, if they began to just be convinced? There was another great example. It's a good thing people can't copyright adjectives, or then I don't guess we'd say things like great, because somebody would have said it before now. Right? Chaucer, one of the King Charleses. There's an example. I was going to try and push your view, expand it a little bit, having to do with how speech has become a continuing, inseparable service. And there is an example that we've even used that I think can make enough of a contrast, having to do with what ordinary life calls romance. Now, in times past, we have sort of as hit and run mentioned romance, and you could take a valid operational view of romance as being a kind of secondary outgrowth, a secondary version of primary sex. Now, we have even used that in the past, but it is in fact now much more complex than that. If you take romance, just in the ordinary sense, romance, and we could even give a definition still, it's talk-based sex. Well, in the same way that dining is talk-based eating. You could take romance, and it's not invalid what we have noted before, but being a kind of secondary version of primal sex. But now, once you can take the view, once you can see that speech itself and everything that is speech-based is a new primary level, then romance is more than that. And it was not intended by anything that we said here, and it's not intended now, to slap romance, to take a kick at. The point was before that romance was not, like everything else, romance is not what the ordinary mind takes it to be, because it is people who can't swim attempting to do high dive tricks and looking down in the pool and thinking, who is that? That sort of thing. So sometime in the past you could have thought that, wait a minute, romance is some kind of cheap shot. And romance is, something for women or wimps or sissies or people that don't really know how to screw right, or people that can't get any and they just have to think about romance. It is an integral part now. It is necessary for life to go on as it is. But taking romance as being speech-based sex, there's a way in which to see that romance, in the full sense of the word, is now a necessary, irreplaceable service, and the service, you could say, is to help man stay civilized. It is to help man be more family-oriented. It is to keep man and push him to be more collectively inclined in a particular way. Everything serves, but there is a point that romance, in regards to sex, serves the collective needs of man in a different way than dining, in regards to eating, does. Do you follow? Whew. All right, I'll take a male view right quick, because we don't have to make any comment about this being non-sexist, as you know. But you women will understand anyway. This is just the easiest example. Men do not. If we're talking about something other than an immediate one-night stand in an elevator, or a 2-minute stand in an elevator, when a man rolls over after sex and he whispers just some kind of soft romantic words to the woman, it is not on the basis that it is the sensitive thing to do, I guess would be today's description. It's not on the basis of any psychological, sociological, or any learned reason. I can't resist backing up for a minute. Watch out for your tires in case those... You know those things. But right quick, this example should be telling to some of you because, to take a side step right quick, men closer to the red team could take a view and do operate in varying degrees on the basis that, I don't have anything to talk about, even to my wife, even to my girlfriend. I mean, we talk a little, we talk about, what speed, or you want to go to a movie, but this stuff that I see in movies or that you may be talking about, I'm talking for an ordinary person of a certain wired up position in life. A certain man could be saying to what I just said, romance, I got nothing against it, I don't guess, but what are you going to say? You get through screwing and nothing to say. I'm not going to turn over and just fake something and say, oh dear, you look so lovely. I've been married to a woman, been living here in the same bed with her for 20 years. She weighs 50 pounds more than she did. She ain't that good looking. She knows it. Why should I do that? That's not the point. See, I bring that up to show that some men, and it doesn't matter that I'm saying men, as his life's needs being met, that a man could say that. And he could say, all right, if anybody does that, it's in some way a sham, it's a pretense. Because not only do I not do this, I'm still talking about some ordinary guy. He could say, not only do I do that, he could say, it's my belief that most men don't feel that. That if men do that, more than I know, if they do engage in that kind of romantic talk, it's because that they figure that women nowadays expect to hear it, or that they better do it, or their old lady's going to whine and cry and then probably won't give him in next time, or so they just do it. Now, I point that out because some movie, some cheap book, some expensive book could take that position and say, well, that's what's going on. That is not it. Because it is not being done for some woman's benefit. It is not being done for some man's benefit, like, well, I got to do it or she'll raise hell. It is life's genetic needs being met. Being met on the basis of additional talk. Because on top of sex, this kind of, quote, romantic talk seemingly creates more between the two people than just sex. Than just older, more primitive needs and acts. What is civilization? What is collective progress? Now, we're talking about collective still. So, if you can fall into that, it is not simply that sex is some kind of, or that romance is some kind of watered down, dressed up version of sex. Now, if we were still children, this was kindergarten, we could say that and try to get you looking at it a certain way. But it's still, even that sounds as though it's critical. Having said that, I assume all of you can right quick realize that critical has two meanings in the definition. That's not a criticism, but it is critical now because sex alone, in the civilized, general, middle-class area of life, sex is no longer adequate. I don't mean for some individuals. Sex is not enough. Screwing will certainly keep the population alive if man was just a population. But as I said, you cannot back up, and so you cannot have unromantic men anymore. And now I'm saying men with a small m, men and women. Men cannot simply engage in rutting as though you were hippos and rhinos and wildebeest. You certainly could, and you're back to the good old Rousseau-based dreams that continually pop out in literature and anomalistic daydreams here and there that men have of, boy, what's ruined sex is romance. Somebody's always whining about that, and somebody's saying what we should do is all, here we go, back to the noble savage. And they'll say it's either we should go back to the noble savage and quit eating nouveau California cuisine and go back to sucking on acorns and tree bark. And not only that, go back and living in the woods naked and just everybody screw. And you don't have to tell a woman, what's your sign? Sure, I'll call you in the morning. Boy, you're looking good. It's that old dream about, boy, I wish I could back up without running my tires, which you can't do. Nowadays, romance is not an option. Not collectively. It is an absolute, inescapable, cohesive force in all civilization. It is now part of the collective wisdom. Men could not think. There could be no progress. We would not be shooting off rockets. Pardon the potential erotic symbolism there. We could not be flying into space. We could not be having color TVs and working on high definition TVs. Were it not for romance. Because were it not for romance, to take a real quick 30-second position, surely you see this in its crudest form, men would not be civilized without romance. We'd still be killing each other, to take the cartoon version of caveman progress and evolution, if it was just sex. If it was just sex, that's all it was, and you were just animals, you just go screw somebody and you'd walk away. Regardless that there are individuals still around that say, well, I wish I could do that. That's the way God intended. Or that's the way the Baptist God intended, or some... We would not have civilization. We would still be killing each other over sex, over food. But let's stick on sex for a minute. Have I got a minute or so? It had to be romance. There has to be now, the way I put it to you, words create seemingly more between the people. And I don't mean that as a negative statement. It's not that it's an illusion or a delusion, but to turn over and do life's bidding. You're working for life, to take the male position again right quick, for a man to roll over. Just an old crude man that's not romantic at all, but right after sex to roll over and just to whisper some little something, just romanticism. If it was just noise. It is the seeming creation of something new. It is a verbal new reality that there is something more between you and I than just sex. Not that that's wrong, but just sex is too old. Just sex is anomalistic. Just sex is too primary. Are we completely out? Bye.